Need Bitcoin support? The pros at Coinbase Connect are here to help. Learn about self-custody, privacy, mining, lightning payments, and much more. Simply go to coinbase.com/connect and schedule a one-on-one video call with a Bitcoin pro. Take your knowledge to the next level by connecting with a pro on coinbase.com today. Please check out episode 41 with Adam O, aka Denver Bitcoin on Twitter, episode 46 with Hodl Tarantula, or episode 49 with Adam Meister. All are pros you can connect with at coinbase.com connect today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. My name is Chris Alemo, and I am an amateur investor. This podcast is my open source journal of everything I learn about investing and wealth management. I'm here to explore the key concepts, market dynamics, and investing strategies that will assist you on the path towards financial independence and financial literacy. My mission is to build us from amateurs to experts. All suggestions are my own, and I recommend that you should do your own research before taking any investment advice. See you in this week's episode. I hope you enjoy. All right, everyone, welcome to the show. This is episode 55 of the Amateur Investors. In this episode, I'm going to be interviewing the host of Bitcoin Kenny Boy YouTube and the fellow Bitcoin pleb, Bitcoin Kenny Boy. Kenny, thanks for coming on the show.
Chris, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on your podcast. Number what? You're up in the 50s?
Yeah, 55.
Yeah, okay.
Now the honor is all mine, Kenny. So maybe I guess before I start going into the questions, I guess how did we interact and meet? I kind of know, but I want to kind of hear your perspective and for the people on the podcast and all that for listening to the story.
Yeah. Well, so I have my own YouTube channel, which is really a very, very amateurish. I mean, it's very, it's just me, and it's not at all slick or anything. And I occasionally put up videos on just my own spewing, my own, thoughts on Bitcoin. And I have guests every now and then. And I remember, and I'm active on Twitter. And I had a question, I think it was about the mempool.
Yeah.
So I kind of tweeted out, hey, anybody, if somebody can help me try to understand the mempool and maybe talk on my, maybe do a video with me. And you volunteered. And
yeah.
I think that was back in August. So
it was awesome. Yeah, definitely. I'll include that link in the show notes for sure. Yeah, I mean, that was I think that might've been my first time going on someone else's podcast. So it's cool to be on the other end instead of the interviewer, be the interviewee. So yeah, I mean, the internet, I'll just say this broadly. I think the internet's a wild place, especially the communications of social media or anything. I mean, I think you and I kind of love Bitcoin Twitter or just financial Twitter in general. It's so wild that you can DM or message a CEO and, sometimes you don't get a response. Obviously, they're very busy. People's lives are crazy. It's very hard to get the attention of.
It depends who you are.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to get the attention of a lot of the big wigs in the space, but, it's very cool for the ones that do interact. I think they have the more loyal followings. Like, I know I get the privilege of talking with Preston Pish through a lot of his posts, or even just reaching out to Greg Foss, or, just the access you can get to people is just incredible. And I think you can relate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess we'll get right into it. So what I love asking Bitcoiners is, how do you get into Bitcoin? Where did you hear about it? And kind of what were your touch points? I know there's this kind of rule of 3 that a lot of people like to talk about. It's not really a real rule, but just kind of a rule that people say a lot of times. You hear about Bitcoin or touch Bitcoin 3 different times before you finally dive in and invest into it.
I think I had heard that maybe once before. I'm not sure it applies to me because, it's funny. I kind of think I was always, for a long time, or it was only a matter of time before I got into Bitcoin. I think it's by my nature of my thinking, even though I am a boomer. So I'm actually relatively new. I mean, I'm a class of 2020.
Yep.
And I actually first bought Bitcoin in May of 2020. So I missed the March, dump. And in fact, I never even heard, I was paying attention to the stock market at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I had not even, my knowledge of Bitcoin when the pandemic hit was basically anyone, a typical normie who had seen some little thing on TV or Bitcoin. And I know I had asked one of our, a guy I know who's into like IT and stuff. I thought, he would, and he mentioned some about, yeah, it's digital currency. And I said, okay, great. And then I also remember a couple of years ago with a friend of mine, I, and I don't know why I said this. We were talking about investing, and I said, "Hey, Tom, so you think I should invest in Bitcoin?" And he said, "Yeah, buy maybe $10,000." Haha. And we were laughing about it. Well, to put it in context, so again, I'm older, and over the last few years, getting close to retirement, I became more cognizant of my own, my investment portfolio and such.
Mhm.
And, up to that point, previous to that, I was busy raising kids, raising a family, and everything. I mean, most of my retirement is in a company 401k, and I know people bash 401ks, but I think it depends on the company you work for, and what kind of matching you get. And I mean, and it's pretty simple in that you can kind of just ignore it. You set it. Yeah. And a couple of years ago, again, as I'm getting close to retirement, I really started doing the math, and I was looking at my 401k, and I thought, and I also own, I've got the property and other investments, but that's the main thing. My first thought was, damn, I could potentially retire either now or very soon. My second thought was, damn, all we need is a stock market crash, and I may never retire.
Yeah.
And look, it's kind of interesting how we go back in time and say, man, how stupid I was back then. What if I knew back then what I know now? I really, investing and finance wasn't really it wasn't, at least it wasn't my profession, even though I'm a mathematical person. But I just became really unsure of, like, what do I do? Like, I can't be, and then I got really conservative, and my thought was, gosh, the stock market's gotta crash. I mean, this can't go on. And again, I was naive about all the the Fed and everything, and especially once the pandemic hit. And there's that going on, along with the fact that one of the things I just don't like to see is, well, let's, where the government basically picks winners. Okay, well, let's bail these guys out. I've always believed in rules, whether it be sports or something. You have rules, or you play poker, there's rules. And if you win, you win. You don't get to say, well, I forgot my wallet, you're going to have to give me money. And so I just have this really disdain for, all the stuff that's going on. And full disclosure, I've benefited from it because I have financial assets that, go up in price. So,
Yeah.
and I own property, and so I've benefited from it. But, all this is going on. We were locked down, and so, and even on the weekends, if you remember, there was no sports on TV.
Yeah.
So I'm watching a lot of Netflix, and Netflix, I think recommended I like financial documentaries and things. So I think because of that, the algorithm said, hey, watch this documentary on Bitcoin. So that intrigued me enough to say, I've got this money in the bank, and it's like, for a rainy day, earning, 0.0002% or whatever. I'm thinking, why? I got some money, why don't I just buy some Bitcoin? And I'll buy a little bit, and then I'll, it's intriguing enough. I want to learn more. And it's not like, okay, I need to, go through 100 hours of podcast before I buy any. I can buy some, and, hey, if I lose it, who cares? So while I'm doing this, as I'm learning, and I one of my mistakes, I probably should have just, taken all the money I had and just bought bought Bitcoin right there, but I decided to DCA, at the time. But at the time, this was 2000. I think I started buying at 8,000. And again, I should have just bought, but I did DCA. But so while I'm doing that, and I'm very disciplined, I said, I'm going to put so much in every week. And then the more I'm Googling, I'm finding podcasts and things, and I'm just learning about it. And just, the thing that clicks, number one is just, understanding that, yeah, this isn't just some, something some IT guy made up.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, maybe, but I mean, this is not something that someone else is controlling. This, and the other thing that clicked with me, which is interesting that most boomers don't get, you can't actually touch it. You can't actually hold it, which I think turns off a lot of boomers. For me, that's a feature, not a bug. It's like, I can't hold it. That means nobody knows I have it.
Yeah.
And anyway, I just went down the rabbit hole, and then it became where, like I said, I think it was like Saturday was the day I would buy. But then I would find all these excuses like, oh man, I don't want to wait till set. And if it would dip, I would buy more. And, the interesting thing is, as I'm at home, I'm working at home, not the office, I'm watching like CNBC. And I just remember also having a little game where I said, okay, if I'm watching CNBC or whatever, Fox Business or whatever, and someone mentions Bitcoin, I'm going to buy. Kind of like a drinking game. If they mention a name, you do. And keep in mind, this wasn't that long ago. This was last year, about middle of the year.
Yeah. That
happened maybe once a week. Now you got the Bitcoin ticker going.
Yeah.
And, so anyway, that accelerated my purchase. And yeah, that's how I got into it. And as I've just gone down the rabbit hole, I actually, I took some, I had an IRA that I rolled over and into a Bitcoin IRA. And, I'm not like all in, like all my money, but, so I guess, I don't know, according to some people, maybe I'm not a true maxi since I'm not 100%, allocation. But I mean, it's enough that if it does what we all think it's going to do, things will be good.
Yeah,
we'll be fine. And the thing is, I sleep better at night, even though it's crashing today. My God, right? It's Bitcoin's crashing.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. I think that's a really great point. It's funny that you say like, oh, your generation says they can't touch it, so they don't get it. But not to put you guys on blast, but you can't touch Google, but you use that every day. You can't touch Facebook, and a lot of people in your generation use it. So there's a lot of things that are just kind of like concepts, or the internet. I know I'm a little bit younger than you, so I know when I came out of college and into the working world, it was 2015. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm starting to get a real paycheck. And like, I was kind of investing to the point of like, I guess, craziness. My parents were a little worried about me, that like, I was like, the more I can lug away in the beginning, the better I'm going to be in the future. So I was putting 25 or 30% of my income into my 401k for company match and for the benefits of a Roth option. And ultimately that was back in 2015. And I was putting a lot of money away to the point where I was like, Mom, Dad, I don't know if I can like go out to dinner, or I can't go out with friends. My parents were like, you're making more money than you've ever made. Like, you can enjoy a beer with your friends. You can go out to a restaurant. Like, you don't need to get as crazy. But ultimately, I guess I didn't understand money. And I didn't understand, like, I understood that, like, oh, the stock market, your average returns. And I understood, like, looking at expense ratios and stuff like that. But I guess I didn't, 401ks, the way they're set up, you kind of have to pick an index fund or a mutual fund. There's no like individual stocks. I know that changes more on the Roth or the IRA side of things, where I didn't have one set up. So I was kind of just going to max out my 401k. But then, as I progressed, I downloaded Robinhood, and I have since deleted that because of everything that's gone on with them. But, then I started getting into more individual stock picking. And that was maybe in 2017, 2018. So I'd been in the working world 3 years, kind of like learning a lot more about investing. And I guess I always used to see ads for like the Motley Fool. It's like, this is like picking Amazon at $3.19 is like their infamous ad. And
Okay,
I
yeah.
kept thinking to myself, I'm like, Chris, like, I feel like I missed a lot of opportunity, and not because of lack of intelligence. I felt like it was like wrong time, wrong place. Like, I'm like, I said to myself, not saying I would have picked them if I got into the working world in the 2000s or the late 90s, but I'm like, Chris, like, you love evaluating stocks, you love looking at it, like it's very hard if you buy Amazon for it to 100x, or, I felt like I was like, what's going to be my Amazon? So that kind of became my new quest. Apple's already hit its highs.
Yeah.
Amazon hit its highs. Google hit its highs. Like, I can say to myself, like, okay, like, I'm young, I understand technology. Like, it makes sense why those companies make a lot of money. So I was kind of always looking for, like, I missed Amazon at $3.19. So did a lot of people. So I'm not just alone, but like, what's going to be my investment that I see as the next big thing? And ultimately in June of 2020, when, obviously the market crashed, and I've told this story a couple times on the podcast, I had stop losses on my Robinhood portfolio, which is my fun money. And in January of 2020, everything liquidated. Literally,
Okay.
so I had, let's just say for easy numbers, I bought a stock 2 years prior for $50. It was now $100, and I set a stop loss at $94 or $95. I watched as my whole portfolio, from tech, from health, from pharmaceutical, whatever it is, all liquidated in the red. So I'm sitting there like, Chris, it wasn't just like one or two, like one sector or one thing like that. It was everything liquidated. And I'm like, okay, something bigger macro is going on here, that everything liquidated. And then I kind of started doing research. I heard about this potential coronavirus out of Wuhan, out of China. And I'm like, okay, let's wait. Something seems like it's going to happen. And then ultimately, obviously, the March liquidity event happened. Trump made the announcement that we are locking down 2 weeks. And obviously, you can imagine, with locking down an economy of, the US size, but even just globally, if you had to guess, which way do you think the stock market's going to go in that one instance? And I think a lot of people knew that it was going to go red. So ultimately, I watched as it all liquidated. And then by early to mid-April, I started investing a lot more of my fund money. I didn't take any of my 401k stuff. I left that auto DCAing, doing its own thing. And I started investing my fund money back in things that I thought were now officially underpriced. So like Penn National Gaming, they had a big stake in Barstool, which I like. So I bought it at like $9. And then ultimately it went on a run to, $138 and all this. But then I kind of was like, I was, doing really well with all these stock picking, but I'm like, looking across the market, like, something's wrong. Not only did we rebound very quickly, but like everything's in the green. Like, things that shouldn't be in the green are in the green. So then I started kind of to question, like, what is money? And then ultimately by like June, I was like, oh, this Bitcoin thing, internet energy money. And like, it's kind of weird. I don't know who the creator is, but ultimately I threw a little bit of money in that, like $1,000, and I bought it. You're going to die. I think it was like $7,000, $11,000, somewhere in that range.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
And, had I known what I had known now, would have been the only thing. And it also wouldn't have been in Robinhood. Luckily, I was able to DCA out and then buy it on another exchange. I obviously got hit with the tax obligations of that, but not too bad. Nothing insane. It hadn't gone on its historic run yet. I basically put it in and got it out with just a little bit of a gain. But in June of 2020, it really made me start to question things. Ultimately, I started this podcast in November of 2020. And then basically there shortly after, I was kind of really orange pilled. And this has gone from more of just a general investing podcast to more of a Bitcoin only or more Bitcoin centric podcast. Sorry for the long-winded response there. Yeah.
No, so we're kind of on the same timeline. Now, here's what I left out about my situation is I had mentioned, a few years ago, and actually I think it was when Trump was elected. That's when I looked at my 401k. And again, up to that point, I was all in on stocks. From 20 years prior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't care, during the great financial crisis, I didn't even look at my 401k. You know what? I was busy working. I was busy raising kids. Yeah. I had a good job. I didn't care. I knew that I wasn't going to be retiring in 20 years.
Yeah.
But what happened is, and this is where I said, I just said, okay, what I ended up doing is getting really conservative. I put it all in bonds and cash. So what happened is when 2020 came around with COVID, with lockdown, I told myself, okay, this is what I've been waiting for. I was waiting for this crash. It's gonna just crash, and I'm gonna cash in when it's at the bottom. And I'm my patience is going to be rewarded. Well, as you probably remember, it did crash, but I thought it was going to keep going. And then the Fed just kept printing money, and I felt like cheated. And I know that's a bad thing to say, that I wish it would have crashed more, because that would have been now my entry point. But that was the other thing. I just felt cheated. Like, wait a minute, I was waiting for this big crash, and then and the Fed won't let that happen. And then it's like, well, what do I do? So yeah, I just, and when I learned about Bitcoin, it was, number one, it was more going to be, I think I can use this as a hedge.
Yeah.
But the other thing, and a hedge, and this is the other thing, I don't know why other boomers don't get, or not, and not just boomers. And you've heard this before, Chris. Wait, how can Bitcoin be an inflation hedge? Look, it dropped 10% this week. Well, you got to zoom out. And, if you zoom out, you see that not only is it an inflation hedge, but it's also an adoption play at this point, which we're so early on. And you mentioned in Amazon. Why did people make all that money on Amazon? Because they got in early before the adoption. Now, the thing is, do people that bought Amazon, you might say, somebody could say, oh yeah, I bought Amazon when it was $1, but I was stupid and I sold it when it was $3, right?
Yeah.
That's the real key. It's not buying, it's holding. So, and that's the other thing I got into, is I realized this was something not to mess around with. It's like, and you get a hold of this. And then when I learned about self-custody, and then I learned self-custody because I had a Coinbase account. And then I found out, well, I don't really own this Bitcoin. Coinbase promises it to me. And so I got into so I just got into it. And for me, it was also entertaining, and just the whole geopolitical game theory. And the other thing is, and I know you're a big sports guy, Chris.
Yeah.
And I can't remember who your team is.
I'm a lot of New York teams. So
okay.
The Jets, the Rangers, the Knicks.
Well, the great thing is, I feel like, hey, finally I'm on a winning team.
Yeah, I agree. I could not agree more. My teams don't win much.
Yeah, well, I'm neither. Yeah, I'm mostly a Bears fan, and they don't. So I feel like, hey, I'm on a winning team. So
yeah, well, and even perfect example. So obviously people say, oh, it crashed 10% of the last week, or it's down 18% now. It's kind of crashing or holding at 57K as it pulled it up. But this time last year, you want to know what the price is? This time, November 18th, 2020.
I'm gonna guess it was 14 grand.
17 grand, very close. Okay. So if you think about that, 17 grand to 58 is almost what, a 4x? Almost. It's like 3.5, 3 something like that.
And yeah, and I remember at the time, because remember it was about 10,000 most of the summer.
Yeah,
it went up at 17, and I was actually debating, like, wow, maybe should I buy it at 17? I feel like it's a little high right now. I feel like it's going to come down back to 10. Luckily, and it never came back down to 10.
I was telling a lot of my friends, even over the, into February, beginning of the year, February into May. And obviously we were hitting like 64 was the max then, or 63, I think, right under 64. And then ultimately it crashed down to $31 or 31,000, not $31,000, 31,000. And none of my friends panicked, or even it hit 29K at one point. And they were like, this is when we load up. Like, this is how the big money makes money. When you buy, when things crash 50%, that's your chance. Strike then. And even they were like, Chris, we took a 50% haircut, but we're listening to you. We're buying in, and they are very happy they did. Obviously, they're not all in. They have money like me that's locked up. And that's the thing. Like, I want to be a full maximalist, but the tax penalties are so great for me at my age that it's just, I can't comprehend supporting the government, let alone what they do, but just taking the penalty for me to go into another asset. I know some people say I should do it and just rip off the Band-Aid, but I don't know. Yeah,
use the bad money for your food and everything.
Exactly. Yeah. And even like in looking at just investing too, historically, there's people that had Amazon, and I know Michael Saylor talks about this, the CEO of MicroStrategy, for people listening, that he's like, do you look like the genius if you were trading, Amazon stock between $119 and $5, or because it went up to 119 in the internet boom and then crashed down to $5. He's like, it's now sitting at $3,696 at end of close today. He's like, you should have been buying way more at $5 than you were even at $119. So it's like, it's not the buying or selling that's hard. It's the holding on. Like it's doubling down with your conviction that makes it more difficult.
And like Greg Foss says, it's a rounding error.
Yeah. Well, I love Greg Foss. I had him on the podcast. It was great having him on. And yeah, exactly. Like he says, if this goes where we think it's going to go, are you going to care if you bought at 5,000 or 50,000 or 60,000? No, it's going to be minuscule in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. I can relate to Greg. Not only, I think our hair color is kind of the same. We're about the same age.
Yeah.
I think we studied. I mean, my study is actuarial science and statistics and mathematics, but I know that I reading his paper, and I know he was in the fixed income. I mean, I studied that stuff too back then. I probably read the same books as he read. So yeah, and
So I guess moving on to another topic. I know we were talking even before the episode. You definitely wanted to talk about Bitcoin in like relative terms, with a lot that has happened, obviously, since March of 2020. We've seen, a nation state adopting Bitcoin. We've seen a publicly traded company adopting Bitcoin. We've seen MicroStrategy, the publicly traded company that adopted it, had done all these different debt offerings, whether it's, long-term bond debt, whether it's, all these different debt offerings in order to buy more Bitcoin, basically. Obviously, we saw him DCA into Bitcoin in the millions of dollars. I wish all Bitcoin plebs were kind of like Michael Saylor, could do the same and have mainly controlling interest in the company while being the CEO and president. But with all of that list of things that have gone on the more positive side, you obviously have a lot of mainstream media bashing it, whether it's the Jamie Dimons of the world saying, back in 2015 or 2016 or 2017 timeframe, basically saying if he caught anyone in his company buying or selling Bitcoin, they'd be fired immediately. And then lo and behold, his daughter comes out and tells him, Dad, stop talking bad about Bitcoin. I bought 2 of them. So that was back then, which I didn't hear about. And obviously, with him being an insider in a publicly traded company, one of the biggest financial institutions in America, or at least in the Fortune 500, he obviously disclosed, hey, I just want to let everyone know, not that I'm an insider. My daughter owns Bitcoin, and I reprimanded her for that. And obviously, I think she should own stock in the U.S. stock, blah, 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 blah. But then not even that, just like even Ken Griffin, one of the hedge fund managers, basically them all criticizing it. The Warren Buffetts, the Charlie Mungers, the Jamie Dimons, Ken Griffins, a lot more of the hedge fund managers or the risk managers have come around to it. Ken Griffin's kind of the exception to the rule, but you've got Paul Tudor Jones. You've got Ray Dalio now saying about it. You've got Stanley Druckenmiller. I respect these guys a lot. And I think Greg Foss points out, a great risk manager isn't someone that stands by their conviction. They're a great risk manager for changing their opinion when the facts change. And I think that's very important that, they were against Bitcoin for a long time. And that's fine. I understand that. I get that. I'm against certain stocks, equities, and bonds, actually quite literally all of them right now, because I just think they're overpriced. But they kind of see Bitcoin as not only an inflation hedge, but they see it as a valuable asset. And now they've started allocating a lot more of their portfolios to it. And it's rewarded them and their clients for doing so. I don't know if you want to expand on any of that.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I can say, oh yeah, I'm a genius because I bought Bitcoin, last year. But to me, it takes real guts to have bought it, 5 years ago. Because look, you didn't have. It was still even more. We say we're early. It was really early then. You didn't have the infrastructure in place back then.
Swan Bitcoin wasn't around.
Coinbase was probably even very small and unknown. And, you had the Mt. Gox. I mean, that probably scared most people away. So these people, these OGs that, like and you can agree or disagree with a lot of these guys, but like, hey, they had some guts, and, they obviously they didn't just put in a few dollars. They put in some, a stake in it, and not only that, but they kept, they didn't sell it when it doubled.
Yeah.
And as far as it's interesting about like the diamonds and Ken Griffin. So what I think is I don't care honestly, I don't care whether other people like it or believe it or don't believe in it. That's not, I'm going to make my decision based on my own belief. However, I just think, well, and the media, I don't know how to say this in a nice way about the media, so maybe I should say little, but I, you know, I don't think much of the mainstream media. First of all, I think they're bought. Basically, they have there's they are influenced. Big surprise there, and plus the media today has to compete with everything. When I was growing up, you had 3 TV networks, and that was the news.
Walter Cronkite and
right,
and
but what I think is disingenuous is, okay, I don't care who, Ken Griffin. Okay, you're a big, okay, but so why do we want your opinion on Bitcoin again? Just because you run a hedge fund, that doesn't mean you know anything about Bitcoin. Now, if this was 3 years ago and I watched that, Ken Griffin on talking about Bitcoin, I might say, well, it makes sense. Hey, he's a finance guy, Bitcoin stocks, it's all the same thing. But they give these people a forum and they don't know anything about it. I mean, and one of the most ridiculous things, I remember there was I don't know if it was a Senate hearing or, there were so many of them, right? And they were talking about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. They had Jim Cramer testify. Jim Cramer from CNBC.
Yep, I know.
And this guy's clueless.
He's actually banned. I think he's banned from trading on the stock market because he was doing fraudulent things. So he's like an advice column, or I forget how they word his show, that he's not allowed to get he's basically just a talking head, but he's not giving financial advice, but he's barred from trading on the US stock exchange.
He's not allowed to give finance advice, and yet he's on CNBC touting this or that. And but I just think that, and again, I think it's, beware, do your own research, or rely on someone who you trust that has done the research, and not just somebody that's on TV. And don't trust me. I tell people that, I've orange pilled a few people, but I tell them, I said, look, and they say, Ken, I believe you. I'm going to buy it. I said, yeah, but you know what I want you to do? I want you to try to understand this, because as much as you trust me and you buy it, when it drops 50%, you're going to start wavering in your trust with me. And what would really help is if you are convinced based on what you understand, not what I told you.
I think you're doing a real solid favor by doing that. And I think it's easy to get into talk basics, but this goes deep, the mining aspect, the reward system of the halving cycles, how it's transferred, how it runs, the lightning network, liquid, monetary policy, history, collapse of empires. It attacks all that, electrical engineering, green energy, the true green energy that you're looking for, low cost power. You can do this for hours. I mean, since I've really started diving into it since January of 2020, or June of 2020, my apologies. I mean, I'd like to think that I've put in close to 500 hours, or if not more, between podcasts, books, YouTube videos, you name it. Probably even more, probably close to 700 hours of just studying.
Or how about Twitter Spaces?
Twitter Spaces as well, Clubhouse, all of that. It's been pretty relentless doing all of that. And it takes a lot of work. I mean, even me, I was always confused about the block size war, and I haven't read the book yet, but I did a lot more research on it. I'm like, well, why didn't it work? Why was there a fight for big blocks versus small blocks? It's like, oh, because it was centralizing power. It's like, yeah, but then why did Bitcoin win in the end? It's like, oh, because, the market was going towards that because they don't want another central authority telling them what to do. So it's pretty amazing. So I guess that segues nicely into my next question. So we've been taught to, not give our hopes up with anyone in the Bitcoin space. Exactly like you said, the Ken Griffins, the Jamie Dimons, but this expands even more, the Elon Musks, the the Francis Suarez, or the mayor of Miami, or even now Eric Adams, the new New York City mayor or the mayor-elect, because I think he doesn't start until January is when he officially goes into office. But a lot of these big figures have said, oh, yeah, I'm buying Bitcoin, and everyone celebrates and rejoices and they're happy because they're a big name. They've got more financial clout, or, more people view their stuff than maybe you and me can. Not to put us down. They just have many more followers on Twitter or pull than us.
Yeah.
But then it always seems they capitulate, whether Elon Musk saying Dogecoins is the future, not Bitcoin. But even he is kind of suspect because it's like, look at what he does, not what he says. He still owns $1.3 billion worth of Bitcoin, or 1.5 or 1.15 or whatever it is. Like, he still holds that on Tesla's balance sheet. So even though he's saying that, he still owns a ton of Bitcoin. But even Mayor Suarez or Mayor, soon to be Mayor Adams, they both want to do Miami coin. And well, they're doing Miami coin and then paying crypto dividends, or they have New York City coin. And I guess I want to hear your opinions, and then I'll add my commentary to that.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit torn because I think, well, first of all, I kind of laugh at these guys because they probably are clueless and they probably have some staffer who's probably getting information from them. However, I think it's a positive that somebody is in their ear, because again, these are politicians, right?
Yeah.
And they don't do anything without, a motive, without vote, without
money or votes.
Thinking I need, so obviously something is getting their attention that, hey, you want to, promote this. Now, you get, of course, then they end up throwing the whole crypto. I hate the word crypto, by the way.
Yeah, me too.
They throw the whole thing, but I guess, it's better than, being opposed to it. Now, what I like is more, now obviously I'm more, I feel that like some of the people like Lummis, Cynthia Lummis, I mean, she's more of an example of really the folks we need, in Washington. But she probably really gets it, and it's not just a soundbite or that a staffer whispered in, hey, you want to get votes, that Bitcoin,
Yeah.
But I mean, it's good that that's happening, and look at what happened with this infrastructure bill. Everyone was like, oh man, they put that damn language in there. I think it was a net positive. It brought attention to it, and it actually, I mean, the fact that they were debating it, to me, is, I mean,
I heard the phones were ringing off the hook too, which, I mean, the staffers and people were saying, you guys are one of those crypto people, please leave us alone. But it's like, it gets their ear, when we lit up the phones, I know some people in the Bitcoin community say it doesn't matter, it's not going to affect, some people say don't vote, it's a waste of your time. And to a certain extent, I kind of agree. But at the same time, I also say, it is important to, we don't want to be, I guess, we don't want to make it even more difficult on ourselves than we already are. So so I guess I'll add to it. So for those that don't know, the Miami coin, they were saying obviously it's a coin that can operate in New York's in Miami. My apologies.
Okay.
And they can use it as a cryptocurrency to pay for things, and you're incentivized if you hold it and stake it, which I hate staking in crypto and that whole thing. And they're going to pay your stake in Bitcoin dividends. So I see this as three things.
Okay.
One, I see this as like a rug pull, meaning that, if they're saying that basically what they're doing is they're printing Miami coin they're making it up out of thin air, and then they're giving you Bitcoin. So it's the equivalent of the city of Miami turning on their printing press and basically trying to buy more Bitcoin to pay people. So I'm assuming that they would partner with a Coinbase or some type of exchange, and they would give them Miami coin, and then they would get Bitcoin, and that's how they pay dividends. Two, it's a speculative attack on the US dollar, but it's coming from within, like a politician's doing it against other politicians that are, more of the people in DC. Obviously, Mayor Suarez is based out of Miami. He's not doing too many trips to DC. He leaves that for the congressmen and women and the senators from his state or the other states to go.
But he's in the right state that's going against the DC, that's for sure.
No, exactly. And then, but like the music's going to run out. I mean, that's what anything is. That's what Nimble Wimble coin is. That's what Dogecoin is. That's what Shiba Inu coin is. They're printing their money. Yeah, they're not developers or programmers, or at least they have ones hired by the city to make Miami coin, but the music's going to end, and it becomes like, it'll be like, I don't want to say like the Zimbabwe dollar. It'll like its value will fall against the US dollar, and then the US dollar will fall relative to Bitcoin. But I think it's just another rug pull event. It's just kind of funny that they're trying to use a currency or a cryptocurrency created in the United States by a government of the United States to attack the currency of the United States, and then give a reward of hard money that such as Bitcoin. Obviously, it hasn't been paid out yet. I think they're doing quarterly dividends or by year or by every 6 month dividends. But so it remains to be seen how it's going to go. But it's very interesting. It's the speculative attack and the gamification of it, basically.
Well, yeah. So I have to confess, I really haven't looked into that in detail. I mean, so it's not like what they're doing in El Salvador then.
No.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. And at the end of the day, like I said, it's a double-edged sword. That it's great that, number one, it's kind of promoting Bitcoin, well, there's kind of everything in the wash, but and it's in Miami, and of course FTX, look how big they are.
Yeah.
And of course, but again, it's like everything else comes with it, that but they're huge. They're they've got Tom Brady and the spokes and everything. But so it's a good and a bad is it brings the attention to what it needs attention, but then also it could potentially bring some bad publicity too if things don't go right.
Yeah, like FTX bought the naming rights to the Miami Heat Stadium. I know it was just announced the other day, like 2 days ago, that crypto.com just bought the naming rights to the Los Angeles Lakers. And I think it was a 20-year deal. It was something absurd. And, it remains to be seen whether they will be able to afford to pay that deal. Obviously, the more Bitcoin they hold, the better off they'll probably be. But they obviously make money on the altcoins, or I won't give them their other name. But they make more money on the trades. They make money on the buy side and the sell side of doing those transactions. So obviously they incentivize people to buy the Doge, the Shibu, the whatever coin that's coming out next.
Well, they incentivize people to trade is what they're incentivizing people to do. So it's good. Again, it's good and bad because it brings attention, but not quite. I mean, it doesn't bring attention. It's not like, hey, this is a sound money. It's bringing, if it's not really educating people about why you should have Bitcoin. It's basically saying, hey, come in here and buy and sell and trade and all that stuff, and and then, hey, we'll bring out another coin next week, and
Yeah, so I'm gonna steal a line from Saylor because Michael Saylor is brilliant at what he does, but he's like, it's all good for Bitcoin. They criticize Bitcoin, they're talking about Bitcoin. They praise Bitcoin, they're talking about Bitcoin. They bring up Bitcoin and say, oh, it remains flat, it's good for Bitcoin. So I think I agree with that sentiment at all this stuff. Obviously, Bitcoin is the king of crypto, and it will remain that way for the foreseeable future. I know everyone talks about the ETH people talk about the flippening. I don't see that happening. And even if it does, I think if that happens, Bitcoin's price would dip, and people who are in the Bitcoin community say this is another opportunity, and then ultimately they'll surge past it eventually. But I don't know if that'll happen. It remains to be seen. I'll let the free and open market decide that, but we'll see. So Kenny, what would you consider, I guess, the biggest attack vector that Bitcoin has to overcome, or that the community should be wary about right now? I know I have mine listed, but I would like to hear your opinion on that matter.
Yeah, and I think we've touched on a little bit, but so I have two, and I'll try to make it brief, but
okay.
I guess I would have two that I think are legitimate, as in not zero probability. And now when I say threat, I think they're more of a threat like a near-term threat, not necessarily long. Well, one is the whole thing about the government. Now, banning it, but I mean, you can't really ban it, but I do think there is that threat. I'm going to call this scenario A of, what they've been talking about is that, the government kind of makes it difficult, whether it be through taxation or what. We've seen, like China. Okay, so in theory, other countries doing it. That's one scenario. Scenario two is what we talked about is I hear people say, okay, well, Bitcoin is boomer coin. And it's time, there's going to be another coin that, whether it be ETH or some that's gonna take over. So those are the two. Now, I would counter that with first scenario A, the thing with the government. I mean, just look at the evidence of all the infrastructure that's been, people talk about the bit like the cap, right? Oh, look at the cap, it's still small. Not just the cap, look at all the infrastructure. Look at the companies that have been built, the industry. Look at the influence that's developing. And when people talk about governments, number one is, okay, Bitcoin is international. So if a government, you're going to need a lot of governments banning it, coming together. You think El Salvador is going to go along with that?
Yeah.
You think the rest of that's going to be their opportunity? It's like whack-a-mole. While everyone else is if everyone else wants to ban it, like let's say I heard something about Norway. Did you see that something about? Okay, so let's say Europe and the United States decide to ban it. I mean, if I'm El Salvador, if I'm the Central America, I'm the African countries. This is an opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, that's one thing. The other thing about governments, and again, maybe being a boomer gives me some perspective because I can go back. The same thing with the internet. I mean, there was talk about that too. Oh, the internet, it's this and that, and it uses a lot of electricity, and here's what happens is things evolve. First of all, people of influence, let's face it, political action is based on money. So that, but also the great thing about, and again, a government is nothing more than it's people within a government. Now, some of these people in the government have probably a lot more power than they should.
They also, some of them hold Bitcoin too. I know that for a
Yeah,
fact.
right. And that helps. But the other great thing about politicians is that they're people, and the best thing about people is they either outlive their usefulness or they die, quite frankly. And, that's going to evolve. And we touched on voting and everything. In what society does it make sense for the president of the United States to be an 80-year-old senile guy? Okay, I mean, I'm not picking one. I mean, and you could be
Trump's 78, so he's pretty close.
Right. Well, even the same that, right. And I'll tell you what society that works. It's a society, unfortunately, where the young people don't vote.
Yeah.
It is compared, and I know the reasons are, number one is young people are busier than older people who are retired and have nothing else to do, but that's part of the reason. But nevertheless, it's going to evolve. It's not going to get banned. And again, I think, they can make it difficult, like these politicians do, until they're replaced.
Yeah.
And I really think that we are at a kind of a crossroads politically where I think some politicians are starting to get the message. Hey, you sure you want to attack this? It may not be good. Now, to the issue of like, okay, another coin or something. Again, I just think that some people miss, to me, and this is my opinion, I might be wrong. I don't see, we talk about crypto. I think Bitcoin is, I don't even consider it crypto. I mean, and I don't consider it a technology. It's like to me, it's a protocol. The other things are all backed by venture capital. They're all backed by, they're kind of owned by people, right? They're not decentralized. And if people talk about, oh, ETH is going to, flip the Bitcoin, I think ETH is vulnerable to other coins like Solana coming up. They're all going to be fighting for that, whereas Bitcoin kind of stands alone. And yeah, can it be hurt potentially as you get these altcoin bull runs and maybe some money that could be going? Yeah, but in the long run, what is funny? Everyone talks about, oh man, ETH, look at ETH compared to Bitcoin over the last year. But whenever the crypto crash, like right now, like crypto's crashing, right? What do you hear? Oh, Bitcoin's crashing. They don't talk about that ETH is crashing even more. And that's the thing, when in order to figure out, hey, who's the big dog? It's not about who does the best. It's like when things go bad, who do they talk about? They
Yeah.
talk about the big dog.
Yeah, exactly. They don't talk about the other ones. I mean, Doge has crashed a lot.
Yeah.
And they don't talk about it anymore. Shiba Inu, like it's, oh, Bitcoin's moving down. It's, you don't hear the other ones moving
I mean,
down.
if they're all so much better than Bitcoin, how come they all basically, yeah, okay, I get it. They have some of you look at over, they might have a bigger return, but they all orbit around Bitcoin.
Yeah. There's one of my favorite charts from Twitter, and it shows a map since Bitcoin's inception, and then it shows other colored lines that are other cryptocurrencies. And Bitcoin, it shows its price, and then all the other cryptocurrencies are trending towards zero on the other axis. And yeah, for the short term, you can see not that they overlap Bitcoin. There are a few that cross it in terms of gains, but then they always return back to the mean, which is zero. And the reason that ends up happening is because the other cryptocurrencies are all centralized. They're all and ETH. I always say to people that love ETH, it's like, do you want to give another person, whether it's Vitalik or whether it's anyone else aside from your whoever your God is, whatever religion you're in, aside from giving them the control of your money or your life, do you really want to give Vitalik, where he is notoriously, him and his developers reversed the transaction? Yes, it was fraudulent. Yes, it was a hack, but if he just doesn't like you, he could reverse your transaction if you want. I'm not saying he's going to do that. I'm not saying he wants to do that, but he could. And that's a threat. That's an attack vector. You don't want that.
Yeah. Well, and let's say you like Vitalik. Well, maybe he's not going to be around forever. And
exactly.
Then someone's going to, and to me, and again, I feel comfortable talking about Bitcoin. The other stuff I don't understand as much. Now, I can understand people say all the use cases and all. Well, that's all great, but does that make it a store of value? I mean, just because something is useful, does that mean it? What is that? Why does it mean it has to have the token? Has to have that? Like some of these things, why is there even a token?
Yeah, I agree.
And somebody once said they create these tokens to take your Bitcoin, basically.
Yeah, exactly. American Hodl said, altcoiners love your Bitcoin too. They just love your Bitcoin. Altcoiners love Bitcoin too. They just love your Bitcoin. That's what it was. Yeah. So I agree with a lot of sentiment. I guess my attack vector is a little bit different. I guess it is tied to the law, but I kind of see the provisions in the infrastructure bill. I see those as pretty detrimental. I know, and there was kind of arguments from Senator Loomis, Senator Wyden, I believe his name was, and Senator Cruz. So Cruz was just saying, strike it down. Wyden was saying to change and tweak something, and Loomis was saying to tweak it in a different way. They were all better provisions to what they were, but this is like just how antiquated our system is. That I didn't know this, that when they're trying to amend bills that they're trying to pass, or especially bills nowadays, if any one senator has any issue with it for any reason, they can strike it down. So they're trying to make an amendment, and they have to go around, are all in favor, say aye, any say nay. And this one guy, he is retiring. He's ending.
Alabama, right? I forgot his name.
Yeah. And he ultimately, he wanted another 10 billion or 15 billion for defense spending in Alabama, or for weapons manufacturers down in Alabama. Ultimately, he didn't get that, so he denied it. And when people ask why I denied it, he's like, oh, I thought it was a great amendment, any one of the amendments. I just didn't get my way, so I did it. It's like, okay, so you're gonna make a hissy fit just because you didn't get your amendment, so no one can have their amendment.
I'd heard really it was Yellen who really wanted that in there, that language, so that would give it. But you know what? She's gonna be dead soon, so I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
And things evolve. Look, things don't happen overnight, and there can be short-term pain. But try, and we can always look back at history and assume everything was smooth. The automobile didn't have a smooth. Do you think that was smooth sailing? No. And who wants an automobile? Well, where am I going to get gas anyway?
Yeah.
What kind of road? I can't. Oh, that's a joke. These things are a joke. They break down all the time, and people were laughing.
They're dangerous, and
they're dangerous.
There's no seatbelts, whatever it may be. Yeah.
Because they didn't have, Ford and the Ford Motor Company didn't quite have the leverage yet. So yeah. I mean, we could be both wrong. It could. If it goes to zero, I'm buying before it gets to zero. I'm buying all of it for one penny.
That's the running joke is I think there's enough Bitcoin plebs, not only just in the United States, but in the world, that say the closer it gets to zero, I'm trying to buy the whole supply then, and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
So I think there, always people say the plebs set the new bottom or the long-term holders set the new bottom. And I think to an extent that's true. Yeah, there's going to be at some point where some plebs, I guess not fall off the bandwagon, but sell some for whatever reason, for health, for money, for wealth, for transferring it down to your family, whatever the reason may be. But yeah, it's a long-term hedge. And so, well, not only the cryptocurrency provision that I see as an issue, I really see, I think it's in the Build Back Better bill, which hasn't passed yet, but Janet Yellen really wants the $600 limit on bank accounts, which I think is a broad overreach of the federal government's reach.
Now that's you mean reporting, right? You can do it. You just have to be reporting.
Yeah, that's the reporting. If that's not just coming for your fiat dollars, that's coming towards cryptocurrency. Like, that's also going towards cryptocurrency. And it's more of a control thing. I think you agree that like you said, they either outlive their usefulness or they eventually pass away, for better or worse.
Or it does kind of stunt the industry to where we're going to lose a lot of it to other countries. So I think it could be bad for the US, but I don't think it's bad for Bitcoin. Is going to thrive, but it could hurt the US. But as long as you've got your Bitcoin.
Yeah. And so it's very funny. So I'll just kind of end on this one little note before we begin the final wrap up. But I know in listening to a lot of the videos online and listening to more of the politics stuff, I do kind of hate that it's become left and right. It seems like more of the left or Democratic senators or congressmen and women dislike Bitcoin. Like, Brad Sherman and even his.
They should love it. They should love it.
I know. Exactly. But even his thing is like, I prefer if people buy the US stock market or the California lottery. It was like, I was so mad at that. I was like, that was so disingenuous to say the California lottery. You might as well just tell people to light their money on fire.
Okay, he's owned by the banks.
Oh yeah, and you look at his top donors, like exactly.
Yeah. And hopefully he loses. I know, what's her name, Erica
Rhodes.
I hope that'd be cool if she ended up unseating him. That would be big. That would be big news. I think every other politician would say, "Oh man, I better behave."
Yeah, no, I agree. And then even you've got Elizabeth Warren saying per transaction of a single transaction on the base layer of Bitcoin costs or uses more energy than a single house does in like 58 days. I'm like, what are you even basing this on? That's not even remotely true or remotely close. They just like to just make up things out of the air. And she already said that she wants to make a cryptocurrency. Basically, she wants to help design the CBDC or the central bank digital currency, where it's, as funny as it is, like I was listening to Ted Cruz talk at BitBlock Boom. And I know Ted Cruz is very intelligent. He's a lawyer by right. And, I've seen him speak and he seems to be very intelligent, but he spoke at BitBlock Boom with Jimmy Song. And I was expecting him to, kind of know what Bitcoin is, know what cryptocurrency is. But Jimmy started talking to him and he's like, oh, yeah, this could really help, strengthen our infrastructure grids by mining Bitcoin in off hours, and like when there's not a high load, and that can help improve the industry and the infrastructure. And I was like, wow, like he actually knows a lot more than I was expecting. And then even I heard recently Alex Gladstein from the Human Rights Foundation, as well as CJ Wilson, the retired baseball player who's a Bitcoiner. It's really cool having pro athletes. And
I heard them. I heard they were on a podcast. I heard them.
So they were saying, I heard their podcast as well. I don't know if it was We Study Billionaires or the.
Yeah, I think it was.
So they were talking about the recent time in DC. And they were both saying it's a game. Like they're not from the political realm, but they went down to DC. They dressed in their suits. They dressed all nice. But they were kind of saying for senators, you don't realize like senators have like anywhere from 30 to 40 staffers. And, normally he says senators, their staffers seem to be the ages of like 20, like in their late 20s to early to mid 30s, where the staffers for congressmen and women seem to be kids that are like 22 to max 30. So he's like, wait, these are the people that are writing the laws? And they're like, yeah, like these kids will be writing one page of the infrastructure bill. And so they were talking about how like, they kind of see the game. There's one senator from Kentucky who's a Republican who refuses to meet people in his office because if you do, you have to log it. So they're like, they see the games, and like, it's very bad to be talking to a Democratic senator being a Republican and vice versa. but they had a chance to talk to Senator Loomis and her staffers, and they were very thankful for her time. They know she's very busy, but they're like, it's funny. It's almost like cliques or teams. Like she's like, all of Senator Loomis's team, they knew who we were. They love Bitcoin. They all had wallets. They were talking about their fist bumping. They're having a great time. Whereas one of the other staffers might be funded by banking industry, and privately they're like, I really hate Bitcoin, but I actually love it, but I can't love it publicly. So it's all a game. It's so weird. But they said it was definitely weird being in that industry, and they were grateful of the time that they did have to talk to the senators and staffers and hopefully adopt. They were there specifically for Bitcoin, not cryptocurrency, and they tried to orange pill a few people, whether it be young staffers or people like that. And they even kind of said that the sign of times is changing. Like a lot of the millennials / Gen Z are their staffers, like I said, for their age range. And that bodes well because my generation and younger understand the internet. We get cryptocurrencies. We understand like these things, and it's more second nature to us, where not to say Gen X or baby boomers don't understand it, but it's definitely more complex and kind of out of their scope or realm of reality.
Well, and a lot of them don't need it.
Yeah.
That's the other thing you got to understand.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett can say whatever he wants because he doesn't need it.
Yeah. Well, I guess in the case of a really bad, I guess, collapse of a currency, which I think the United States dollar we're a long way off. Basically, we have to collapse into two. We've got to collapse into the yuan and to the US dollar. And then eventually it'll be those two. And then those two can collapse at the same time.
And he'll be dead. He'll be dead. And he's not giving his kids any money anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, it's a long ways away. But all right, so last question, then I'll hit you with the wrap-up questions, Kenny. Thank you once again for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you here. So I guess, what do you think Bitcoin's doing for the world? I know this is more philosophical, but what would you say?
Well, I mean, I think it's again, sound money, a fair system, a system where you can't get bailouts. I think, and again, I'm hopefully optimistic of the situation like in El Salvador, countries like that. I again, maybe I listen to like Gladstein and the people that are down there, and it sounds promising. I know there's going to be challenges, but that's the hope, is that these countries that and I've learned so much about how the U.S. has screwed all these countries over the years.
Yeah.
I never even knew that, but hopefully that will help them. Now, as far as Bitcoin, creating this perfect utopia, unfortunately, there are going to be people left behind. And I think we know what's coming. We don't know when it's coming, and for me, it's not so much me; it's for my grandkids. That's what I'm buying it for. You're young enough, maybe, you'll see it, but it's where we're headed. You just have to, like read the fourth turning and such. And hopefully people get it and they get on that lifeboat, but a lot of them aren't.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, a lot of people are, it's easy to say, get off zero. Some people, number one is they don't have time to research it. Number two, every dollar, there's a lot of, even middle class. Is there a middle class anymore? Every dollar goes to food or whatever,
housing or energy. Yeah, exactly.
And they haven't, they couldn't invest in the stock market, let alone buy Bitcoin. So unfortunately, I don't think it's going to necessarily close the wealth gap. But what it can do is reallocate the wealth gap that people now have an opportunity. But it's not going to be everybody.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sad, but I think we're the ones who kind of get it. And again, they used to say, if you take, whatever, you take a rich person, a poor person, you give the rich person, his money to a poor person, and in 10 years, the rich person is going to get that money back somehow.
Yeah.
And that's just the nature of it. And we were blessed by probably the resources to educate ourselves, and the time, and other people may not. So I don't think it's going to be this utopia where everybody, is in a citadel. There's going to be, hopefully we're in there, but not everybody's going to be.
Yeah. And, I hope that there's adoption. I really, Personally with Warren Buffett or Jamie Dimon or Charlie Munger, any of them hating it, like to your point, they don't need it. I really hope the poor and middle class understand it, get it, or maybe even if they don't understand it, but just at least dip their foot in or try to understand it. I think they're going to be the ones that are the big beneficiaries of it.
I mean, there's no other asset in the history of the world where at least that opportunity was there, because this came from the ground up. This didn't come from Wall Street. This didn't come from Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
So if there's any asset where there was that opportunity to front run, Wall Street and them, and I think that they're into it because they have to be into it now. They're begrudgingly into it. They kind of wish it would have died 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But they were wrong.
Yeah. So, Kenny, thank you for coming on the show. I got my final 3 wrap-up questions, or at least 2 wrap-up questions, and then I'll let you give you the floor in the last one. So, I guess, what is your biggest investing or business mistake that you've made in your career?
Mistake. Well, I think number one is probably that, again, I think I mentioned, I kind of freaked out, a few years ago, and I got too conservative because I didn't understand how much manipulation was in the system to keep the stock market going. I just thought it was too good to be true, and I got a little so I mean, I could be in a better position now, but it's not the end of the world, and I learned something. Probably back so this goes back to 2000, and I probably was. I was in my 30s. Remember you probably weren't, I don't know when you were born, but the .com bubble.
Yeah, I was young. I was 8, I think, right around there.
Well, I'm surprised Motley Fools are still around, because I think they are idiots, quite frankly, especially what they say about Bitcoin. But they've been around, and I read the Motley Fool guide to investing. What happened was I was really busy. Worked a lot back in the 90s, and I used to get decent bonus. And what I did is I took half of the bonus and I paid down my mortgage, which I know people say, why do you do that? Well, back then mortgage rates were a little higher, so it made more sense. The other half, I opened up a TD Waterhouse account and started, reading Motley Fools, and I bought all these internet stocks, and I pretty much lost all of it.
I'm sorry, that's a shame.
But the lesson was I didn't buy more than I could lose. I could afford to lose. And so, one of the mistakes I mean, I know you're saying, what's the biggest mistake you made? And, I think people always look at, mistakes they made in terms of what they invested in or what they didn't invest in, what kind of return. I think one of the biggest mistakes you can avoid is just having that, and I can't remember, is it low time preference or high time?
Low time preference is long-term thinking.
Yeah, but I think to have, and I've always had low time preference even before Bitcoin. So I think I was always meant for Bitcoin. But, I think part of the biggest mistakes people make is just, when they're younger, just saying, hey, you know what? Retirement's way up. I want to buy that nice car. I know we have a decent car. No, I want a new car because my neighbor's got a brand new car. So let's trade it in. Or, we have a decent house, but now let's upgrade and get that big house like our neighbor. And that's probably mistakes I didn't make. And from that, it paid off for me. So
yeah, definitely. I guess, what's your favorite book, podcast, YouTube channel, or website that you like to go to for investing information or Bitcoin information? I'll leave that up to you.
Not Motley Crue. Or Motley Crue. Did I say Motley Crue?
Yes.
Motley Fools. Not that one. So you know what? I try not to, as far as investing goes, I mean, I try to read stuff more as just informational. I don't like read something and say, okay, I'm going to follow that formula. I just kind of follow my own. And my formula now is really more, hey, you buy Bitcoin, you hold it.
Yeah.
I allocate my 401 to basically, but I'm kind of moving away from bond, but nothing really extravagant. As far as in investing, the best book I ever read in that vein is The Big Short.
Okay. I saw the movie. Yeah.
And I'm a big Michael Lewis fan. The Big Short, and I also loved. He wrote The Blind Side. But well, I thought actually for The Big Short, I thought the movie was much better. I mean, the book gets into a lot of the weeds, but the movie's awesome. The movie actually has humor and everything, and any Bitcoiner's got to watch.
Yeah.
Big Short.
You know, with oh my God, not
all-star an all-star cast too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with Brad Pitt and Christian Bale, and who's the guy that plays Michael Scott? I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, I know. He stole. Yeah, he's awesome. I forgot his name too. Yeah, but that's it. That was probably the best, most enjoyable. And I haven't read. I'll confess, I haven't read what Bitcoin books, because I feel like I kind of get everything I need.
You got to read at least the Bitcoin Standard.
Maybe I think I'm going to do that. Now you mentioned podcasts, so Safe's, he's got a podcast on that. I love that. I mean, I like a lot of podcasts. Most of my podcasts that I like are kind of content. I mean, you bring on some really big hitters. I love seeing those. Preston Fish. I do like Peter McCormick. He's got some interesting array of guests. I like his. And sometimes I feel like it's kind of you're listening to an echo chamber, but you know what? So what? And people say we're in a cult, but who cares? It makes me feel good, right?
Yeah.
And like I said,
we're on the winning team.
We're on a winning team. I don't have to listen about the Bears, problems.
The Jets aren't any better. They're actually worse. So yeah. All right. Thank you once again, Kenny. I guess if someone wants to learn more about you or your business or your podcast, or where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, I think on YouTube, I think you just search Bitcoin Kenny Boy, like the 3 words. On Twitter, I think it's at KLC Act U. It's kind of cryptic. My email, I mean, if anyone wants to email me, it's all one word, bitcoinkennyboy@gmail.
I'll put them all in the show notes. So
and I don't have a Bitcoin business yet, and I don't work in Bitcoin yet, but maybe in the future. And if anybody just wants to talk Bitcoin, I'm here. I'm down. So, and I appreciate it, Chris. It's been great, and let's definitely keep in touch.
Definitely, Kenny. It's a pleasure having you on.
Right.
As always, everyone, hit the like button, comment. I definitely respond to all comments on my videos. I hate deleting all the bot comments that show up on YouTube, but check us out at squarespace.theamateurinvestors.com. Twitter, I'm very active. My DMs are always open. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it. Have a good one, everyone. Talk to you later.
Bye.